you feel is it selfish to take a trip without our kids?
I was telling my friends and family about it. The way they responded to it, that is what made me feel selfish. My mom is like, she didn't actually miss you that much. That made me feel sad.
It's very important for us as parents to also let our kids have relationships with other people, to let them have relationships with their grandparents, with other caretakers. And when we're not around, they can really build that bond. So, like,
Hello and welcome, our modern Indian parents. Welcome to the sixth episode of this podcast. I'm Rinie Gupta. I'm a pediatric sleep consultant.
I'm Sanchita Daswani, a pediatric nutritionist, and every week we bring you episodes where we are redefining parenting in Indian families. Let's bust some myths and own our modern parenting choices, even if Nani and Dadi don't agree with them.
One such topic that I'm telling you that Nani and Dadi will not agree with is traveling out. Okay. And I have been bugging Sanchita to do a podcast about this because once I came across, there is this Instagram account, the Local Passport Family, where there's a mom from the UK. She's got 6 kids and she's traveling the world with them. And honestly, it is awe inspiring, like what she's doing. And it's so amazing and the tips and everything she shares. But then when I think about my own experiences, honestly, I feel that the whole thing of traveling without kids is just not talked about enough. We were so surprised to know when Sajita and I realized that we are taking a trip with our girlfriends, no husbands, no kids, on the same weekend. She was going to Paris, I was going to Bali, and we were talking about it. And I was like, this is amazing. We have to talk about this on our podcast because I'm sure there are so many young mums actually and dads like you and me who are yearning to travel but then are sort of kind of being held back or second guessing it because they have kids now. So today's topic is going to be super interesting that we're talking about how and when to start traveling without kids.
So interesting because whenever you talk to parents or there's parents to be, a lot of people will say, "Oh, life is over. You better travel now because once you have kids, you can't really travel." And to a certain extent, of course, it's true. Like, you can't just get up and leave whenever you want, like how we used to do before having kids. It takes a lot more work and effort to make sure that our kids are safe and secure and their routine is there, but doesn't mean you can't travel and you can't enjoy. So this is what this whole episode is all about, because there's so much guilt as parents when it comes to leaving our kids. Like, even I remember in the beginning, just to like step out of the house or go for a dinner, I used to be like, okay, I don't know, like I still kind of feel bad when I'm out for the day and I come back and my kids were home. I do feel a bit of that guilt. So imagine having to deal with taking that trip, like leaving the country and going somewhere else. But I'm so proud of both of us because we have done quite a few trips. And I think that's why we were like, we have to talk about this, because a lot of times when you say you're going on a trip and people say without kids, they're like, oh, they kind of give you a bit of a look. Or maybe it's we think they're giving us the look because inside we feel this way. So do you feel is it selfish to take a trip without our kids?
If you ask me honestly, I did not feel it was selfish when I was doing it, but it is the society, the way they kind of judged me. And like, when I was telling my friends and family about it, they're like, yeah, we're planning to take a trip without our daughter. The way they responded to it, that is what made me feel selfish. And that was another thing. Like, I saw this other influencer couple that took a trip, without their kid to Venice or something. And when I went and looked at the comment section, oh my God, they were ripping that couple apart. They were saying things like, this is so selfish. How could you do it? You're going to traumatize your child. Don't have children if you want to travel without them. I mean, people have such extreme opinions about it, right? And it was heartbreaking to see that couple getting chastised like this for taking that trip. But that's the thing, right? Like, I think what people don't realize is that when we take a trip without our kids, it's not something that we are doing it just for ourselves. The reason why we are doing it is because it allows us to come back stronger. It allows us to come back in a better state of mind so that when we do, come back to them and back to our lives with them, we are in a much better space, right? So, do you Tell me, like, have you come across this whole thing about, like, you have to be the all giving, sacrificial mommy all the time? I'm sure you must have, right?
Times have changed now where everyone is learning that that's not the reality. And I think even you can see that with the grandparents and all, they're also leaning into it a bit, like, it's okay, we'll handle the kids, you go enjoy. Because I think they're also seeing that, oh, as parents, I think we're so obsessed with our kids and every little thing they do. I think now the grandparents and parents saying, you guys need to focus on yourself, you need to focus on yourselves as couples, go on that trip. It is getting a little better now, but I think for us, I think it's our own guilt in our mind that we keep questioning, are we doing the right thing? Is it okay? Because but I think there's so much motivations in terms of why we should take a trip. Because I think, and as a couple, you get so involved in your daily parenting. Sometimes you just need that time together. Like, I've gone for weddings with my husband. I've gone when for my 30th birthday, when my kids were only 6 months, we went to Turkey. And I was nervous, but I was also excited. And the scary thing actually about that whole trip was that when we were on the trip on my birthday, my daughter got admitted to the hospital. So then it was literally like, oh, what everyone was saying, or what were those, the devil in my mind. I was like, see, I left and this is what happened. Because then you obviously start thinking this way. But also I remember that the reason I left was because I knew I had backing. I had my in laws there. They had back a day earlier, but it took me some time to kind of let go again, because the word, that's like kind of what you fear would happen when you go on a trip. But I realized that's not in my control.
Your kids are almost 6 this year. So
Yeah,
when they were 6 months old, it was back in the
yeah,
days when we didn't have COVID,
yeah,
so there weren't as many travel
yeah,
restrictions. My
yeah.
baby was a COVID baby, born
Mm,
right in the middle of all the lockdowns and everything. So by the time we could take a trip, even consider taking a trip without her or with her actually at all, was when she was 18 months old. And I'll tell you something, Sanjita, by that time we were feeling so cooped up, and we
mm,
were so frustrated in our own ways. We weren't getting a lot of couple time, like you mentioned. We are so busy in our own routines and everything. I think work stress was like very intense at that point for both my husband and I. We hadn't traveled, and even though we loved traveling before we had kids, we hadn't traveled in years because of COVID and because of having a small baby. And I knew my mom was already coming to Singapore for an event. So I just asked her to come 3 days early. So that's when I knew, like, okay, you know what? I've got a good window now. So I can consider taking that trip without her. Like, I had so many reasons just to get started. I had a lot of fears as well. What if she falls sick? What if she's going to miss me too much? She's going to cry all the time. I had those fears. But then it was just about understanding, okay, are my basics covered? And do I really need this? And I knew that I really, really needed it. We started with this very small trip, but it went amazing. She was so
yeah.
happy. Honestly, my mom is like, she didn't actually miss you that much. That made me feel sad. I was like, what?
I
Are you
know.
telling me she's not just like walking
Yeah,
around the house saying, Mama, Mama, Mama? She's like, yeah,
yeah.
she did that for like the first half an hour. And
Then
after
she
that,
was
she
fine.
didn't really do it anymore. I was like,
Yeah.
what? I am here, like, missing her like crazy. And she is just like living her life, and she was so happy.
And I think I realize that it's more in our head that our kids will really, really miss us. And I think it's very important for us as parents to also let our kids have relationships with other people, to let them have relationships with their grandparents, with other caretakers. And when we're not around, they can really build that bond. So, like, I'm in the summer, I'm going back home to Curacao, and then I'm going for a wedding to Panama. And I'm not going to take my kids. And I am feeling a bit bad about it. But then I'm like, you know what? This is going to be great for them because they're going to get to have that one on one time with their grandparents. So it actually helps them in a way also to get that, develop that relationship, and also learn to be themselves without us being around. Because as parents, we're always kind of like a helicopter. A lot of us are helicopter parents. I am a bit one. I'm trying to chill a bit. So it's kind of nice to see them flourish on their own while we're on the trip. And honestly, I waited a bit till I took the longer trips. Like last year, I went to India for 2 weeks. So that was like the longest I've been away from them. But it was actually great for sides because I got to reconnect with my friends. They actually got to just continue with their routine. for them it wasn't a major change, except I wasn't around, but I made sure they had a lot of people that they were comfortable with, that they were used to seeing. So there's so many ways to work around it to make sure that we really both sides can enjoy the whole process, and it's okay.
Love that. There's so many advantages that you've already brought out. It's good for the kids. They can build relationships with other family members. They can discover their own independence. So, but like, tell me something. What age do you think is okay? Like, I know you took a trip
Yeah,
with your kids when they were
early.
6 months old.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
your kids, it was they were 6 months old. I did it when I was 18, but I think I may have just done it earlier if not for the COVID
Mm.
restrictions. But what age do you think is still like, if now that you think about it, what would be a good age in your perspective?
So obviously it depends on what stage you are, if you're breastfeeding or if they're having formula. Obviously if they're having formula and bottle, you can leave a bit earlier. And also it depends on the solids journey where they're at and the meal plan and the routine. So I think at 6 months I was feeling quite secure. Actually, I hadn't started solids yet. So they were on a proper schedule. They were quite good at it. And even they were pretty much sleeping through the night. So I felt comfortable to leave at that time. But I know, but I feel very lucky that I have my in-laws around, my brother-in-law. I have a great nanny, so I felt that support was there for me to leave.
I think the two things I'm picking up from what you're saying, and I resonate them with them exactly,
Yeah.
is if I ask like what were my two biggest enablers. One was the having a good support system, which of course comprised of my nanny, my full-time nanny, and then I also have my mom who was coming in. And the
Yeah.
other thing was sleep.
Mm.
Because my daughter, we sleep trained her when she was 6 months old. By 18 months of age,
Mm.
I had that complete peace of mind that, first of all, nobody needs to like sit with her or lie down with her or rock her for
Yeah.
however long of like amount of time to get her to sleep. So I knew that getting her to sleep was a very easy thing. And because she's sleep trained, and the other thing was that she's gonna sleep through the night. So I know that once she's down to bed at 7:30, she's gonna wake up at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's
Amazing.
it's like you get that sense of peace or that confidence that, okay, you know what, whoever is taking over, they are not going to be burdened by it. In a way, I know our children can never be a burden as such on the grandparents, but it's still
Yeah.
tough. They are aging, they
It's
need their rest.
tiring. It's tiring.
It is very tiring. We can't
Yeah.
expect them to be up throughout the night with our kids. So I think having that sleep and routine and everything sorted, getting a good support system in place, that two things came together. And I was like, yeah, I've got these two like ground
Yeah.
covered. And that's it. We're good to go. We can go on a trip. And you could do it at 6 months. I could do it at around 18 months. But
Yeah.
anytime where you feel you have these two like pillars sorted, go for it.
And also, when our kids are in a routine, see, what is our concern in the first few years? That they're growing right, that they are getting that enough sleep and all of that. So really, if that schedule and routine is there, you have that peace of mind that on track still. Little bit here and there, they deviate, it's okay. But that meal plan is set, the timings are set, their sleep is set. You know that you are not setting them back in any way by traveling. Let's get into a little bit about how to prepare, because I know a lot of parents listening, they want to go and they know they need to set all of these things. So let's maybe talk about some of the tips or what we did, I know, that really helped us to.
Amazing. So I'll tell you, like, start with my top tip, which is what we just spoke about, is that you need to have a
Mm.
trustworthy caregiver, and you need to give your
Mm.
child time to get familiarized with that caregiver. So, for example, my mom lives in India while we live in Singapore. I
Right.
can't just be like, my mom lands in at 9 a.m. and then at 2 p.m. I'm like, okay, bye. I'm going to go now. Because it'll be a bit of a shock to my daughter, even if she knows and is familiar with her. They need to spend some
Mm.
time together. So please just
Mm.
make sure that, like, the first thing you're doing is getting the caregivers who you're kind of handing the baton to and your child to spend time together, get familiarized with each other. It's not just during playtime. It's not that, like, oh, if they're played with them all day, the night will be just fine. No, you need to give the grandparent or the nanny, whoever is taking over, time to get familiarized with their bedtime routine. With the whole, if you're doing baths, story, the whole soothing to sleep, you need to get them involved in that hands on. The other thing I would say is if your child is sleep trained, great. That's going to be really great for the caregivers who are taking over, but let them know how to respond to certain things. And if your child is not sleep trained, let's say they need to be rocked or patted to sleep, let the caregivers experience that. Let them watch you do that. Let them try it out themselves while you are still around, so that when you go, you know for a fact that, like, at least they have had some experience and hands on practice with getting your child to sleep. So that would be my advice to you as a sleep consultant. The
Mm.
second thing that I'll tell you, and which we have already said multiple times, is that it is very important to have a routine in place. You as a parent, you can carry all that mental load in your head. We're just like, what's my child's nap time? What are they going to wear today? What are they going to eat? Where are they going to go? What plays are going to go? You have all that capacity to hold on to it and plan it. Not everybody will have that. So you need to ease that mental load for that caregiver. Get your child into a routine where you've got a set wake up time, then you've got set times for their meals, you know when their naps are going to be, even some time for their play. So when you put that structure in place, I literally wrote it down on a piece of paper and stuck it to the fridge.
It's
And
so
I was
easy.
like, here, this is the backbone of my child's day that you need to follow, so
Yeah.
that you don't feel like, what do I do with her all day? I'm like, I'm telling you, this is what works for her. So this was like my second, like, biggest thing about, just making sure this is in place before I take a trip with my kids. What about you, Sanchita? Give us some of your, hit
Yes.
us with some of your best tips here.
The best thing to do is just start with a small trip. So even just do a staycation one night or 2 to 3 days nearby. I think you did that as well, right? Just a few days just to ease into it because it is a lot for a new parent and for a baby to go through. So just start small. And then I remember in the beginning it was less like now I feel confident that last year I was able to take 2 weeks off because I built towards that. And the other thing is also to talk to your child and just explain to them because of course parents are who they look for every day, who they want that security and safety and support from. So even at a young age you can say like, mama's going for 2 weeks, I'll be back. Just ease them into it. Now my kids are older, so obviously they ask 100 questions. Why are you going? So I told them, like when I went to Paris, I said, like how you have your friends, I have the same friends when I was a baby, and I'm going to go spend some time with them because we all live all over, and I just want to have some bonding time with them. And they were actually quite excited. And then they were like, oh, what are you getting me from Paris? So talking to them, making them feel involved in the whole thing is also really nice, and
True.
traveling in that way.
How would you just advise parents to handle the meals and make that easier?
But the first thing I would say is you have to have a meal plan. Do not just leave it up to whoever's there, because I need to make sure that for my kids, it's foods they're comfortable with, because you want to make sure they eat. So, no experimenting at that time. Stick to the foods that your child is comfortable with, that they know. Um, have the meal plan in place. Make sure, even for snacks, have a list of 10 12 snacks, because this is when things can go awry, where they start junking and the grandparents keep giving them lollipops, biscuits, all of that. Look, I understand that's a bonding time for grandparents. So, but at least if you have that structure, then at least okay, they will eat their apple, they will have their banana with peanut butter for their snack, their macanas, because you've given that. And then here and there, if they have a biscuit, lollipop, we have to let go. I think also make sure that they know the whole feeding environment. So even if you're spoon feeding, just make sure that they're familiar with it. Or if your child is a baby led child, then make it clear. Set those boundaries, because you don't want it's weird. Some parents come and tell me that, oh, they went on a trip, and now that they're back, their child is not eating themselves, because while they were on the trip the child was spoon fed, and now they're used to that. So have your boundaries as parents as well, and be like, this is the
Yes.
way it needs to go. But you can let go a little bit as well, in terms of the extra stuff that happens, or if the timing is a little off or so, because there's only so much we can control when we're not there.
I'll tell you, even with my experience with potty training, was
Hmm.
that the same things that we are talking about, like how they need to get familiar with the whole sleep thing, the whole meals thing. Even with potty training, again, for a child who is, learning how to go to the toilet on their own and not is out of diapers now, they need to have that trusting relationship with the caregivers to be able to tell them when they want to go. If they don't have that
Hmm.
relationship with that caregiver, they will just either hold it in, which can lead to constipation issues, or they will have a lot of accidents. So both situations are not great. So that's another thing, that during that familiarization time that you're having, with either the nanny or the grandparents, they need to get actively involved in the whole potty training part of it as well. So let the grandparents
Mm.
bring the child to the toilet, let them have that positive interaction, reading books, talking, understanding what the child's cues are, because these are things that are going to help you even when you go away. Because what did happen with me was that I think I missed out this part in my last trip that I took, and we were just potty training our daughter at that time, and she had like a full blown regression, because
Oh.
my mom wasn't quite cued into how to pick up her signals, and then just in those 3 or 4 days, she started resisting going to the toilet, and we had to do a lot of work to fix it. So that's another tip that I really want to give to parents. If your child is a toddler, recently potty trained, make sure that the caregivers are in tune with the child's cues and everything.
And I want to talk about screens as well, because obviously that is a sensitive topic for a lot of us in terms of how much screen time is allowed. So obviously, when we are around, we have certain boundaries, but when we're not around, I've seen it a lot of times when kids go to their grandparents' house even just for the day. There's a lot of screen time happening because also for grandparents, they aren't able to run after the kids for so long. So what I would recommend, and I do this with my kids, is I get those sand timers or I get that digital timer. And what I do is I set screen time boundaries. So you can do the same thing while you're on a trip. So you can say, okay, every day they're allowed 1 hour of TV. You figure out when, and just, that is the limit. And when you get the kids involved, it also makes it a bit better because obviously they are going to protest. It's not like when they turn the TV off, they'll be like, oh, yay, thanks, that was fine. So having a visual reference will really help them. So
Yes.
help the grandparents or the nanny, whoever's handling that situation, to help the
Yeah,
tantrums be toned down a bit. So set that timing, be a bit flexible, and be like, you guys figure out when it is, and have a visual reference for the kids to ease into it and not get so upset when TV time is done.
totally, totally. That timer thing, I'm going to use that. Amazing tip, right? But Sanjita, I tell you, these are all things that we're talking about on how to prepare the child and how to prepare the grandparent, how to prepare the nanny. What's the most important thing that we need to do is we need to prepare ourselves. Because
Yeah.
I tell you, the amount of anxiety I had when I was taking that first trip away, even though I needed it, even though I had all the motivation and all the resources or whatever, during the entire 3 days of the trip, I was glued to the baby monitor, because I had the digital one where the
Yeah.
feed comes onto my phone.
Yeah.
I was watching it like
Right.
it was a Big Boss show. Like I'm Salman
Yeah.
Khan, and this is the
Yeah.
show that's going on, and I'm watching what's going on in my house. And
Yeah.
honestly, my husband's a little bit irritated with me because of that, because he was like, "Can you disconnect? Can you let go?" But I was having a very hard time letting go. But
Hmm.
I think in the last, like, whatever, half a day of the trip, when I finally did let go, when I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna trust the fact that my mom's there, my nanny's there, my child is loved, she's taken care of. And then for every subsequent trip I've taken, I have made a mental note that I need to trust the people who are going to
Yeah.
be there with my child, not be like constantly video calling or constantly looking at the baby monitor. Sometimes you just need to let go, trust, and then make the most of the time that you have taken away. You've taken that trip for a reason. You haven't taken the trip so you can watch your child through the monitor instead of watching them live. So that's a really important
Exactly.
aspect to prepare yourself as well.
I think a great way to do that is by starting with a simple trip and doing all of these tips that we said. I think it'll make it so easy and it'll be so, so worth it.
So, if you're a parent who is listening to this episode and you're on the fence about taking a trip without your kids, I hope this episode has given you the perspectives and the tips that maybe can help you to just take that step out, go and take that trip. And I promise you, you're going to come back so much happier, refreshed, and fulfilled. And it's going to be great for you and your kids.
Really, and we hope that you find this episode helpful. And actually, in the next episode, we are going to be moving on to a topic about things we regret buying for our kids, because I know there's a whole list of products when you're going to be having a child, and there's too much confusion on what to get. So, we are going to dive into the products that we wish we hadn't bought. So, catch you then.